News. Now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Wednesday, June 8th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, 16 degrees, 17 in Smith Falls, and here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. The mask mandate in the last high-risk group of settings is scheduled to end on Saturday across Ontario. Dr. Doug Manuel, an epidemiologist with the Ottawa Hospital, tells the Rob Snow Show it's something that hasn't really been talked about, at least in great length, lately.
I'll be a little bit surprised if we see places like hospitals and especially hospitals, healthcare settings decide themselves to drop the masks at this point. To be honest, it's been a bit of a creeper. Like I kind of forgot that this was going to potentially expire, and I haven't really had a lot of discussions or heard discussions about it in my circles.
Emmanuel says a mask mandate will depend on a number of COVID cases. He also believes high-risk people should still be protected, as some indicators are still relatively high. Places like healthcare centres, in his opinion, should probably keep the masks, at least for the time being. City News Time 9:01. Now your forecast. Here's meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Generally sun and cloud for us today. The high about 23 degrees, and it will feel a little warmer with the humidity. Tonight, cloudy through the evening, light rain overnight, 13 for the low. And tomorrow, periods of rain, the high about 19. For today, the high 23.
And right now, 16 degrees in Ottawa, 17 degrees in Smith Falls. The plan for Lansdowne 2.0 will be up for debate at City Council when they sit in about 1 hour's time from now. Here's City News reporter Chris Curries.
The north side stands at TD Place and the Civic Centre need to be demolished and rebuilt. But while OSEG is doing that, they'd like to add 3 high-rise towers on top, adding 1,200 units. That and more will cost over $330 million and will be discussed at today's meeting. It's expected to become a bit of a heated discussion because it's not universally agreed upon. Some councillors and community groups would rather see more public consultations before a plan is approved by the next term of council. Also up for discussion is the plan to implement a new vacant property bylaw, which would hold property owners accountable for their vacant buildings through a new permit system, an increase to the fares for a taxi cab up by 10%, and plans to reroute the LRT. That would take place for Stage 3 and would see a raised track along Woodruff, thereby avoiding the need to demolish 120 homes in the Manor Village and Sherrill Gardens neighborhoods. That does come with a price tag of over $35 million. Chris Curries, City News.
City News Time, 9:03. Now from toilet paper to yogurt to coffee and corn chips. Manufacturers are quietly shrinking package sizes without lowering the price. It's dubbed shrinkflation, and it's accelerating worldwide.
A small box of Kleenex now has 60 tissues. It had 65. Cottonelle Ultra Clean Care toilet paper was 340 sheets, now 312. Experts say shrinkflation isn't new, but it proliferates in times of high inflation as companies grapple with rising costs for ingredients, packaging, labor, and transportation. Global consumer price inflation was up an estimated 7% in May, a pace that will likely continue through September, according to S&P Global. I'm Julie Walker.
Now, is there light at the end of this tunnel? Apparently no. Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development says Russia's war in Ukraine, the energy and food crises have made things worse, severely dragging down global economic growth and pushing up inflation even further. The group of 38 largely wealthy nations now estimating global economy will grow by 3% this year. That was down from 4.5% the forecast back in December. Inflation is forecast at nearly 9% in member countries, nearly double the previous estimate. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Separating headlines
from hearsay.
It's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Well, it's going to be a long city council meeting today. It'll probably be a very expensive one, too. Good morning. Welcome to the Rob Snow Show, City News. You know, we're always happy when you make that decision to spend part of your day with us. The big local story is the Double City Council meeting. The last City Council meeting was canceled because of the storm recovery. So a lot of those items from the last meeting carried over into this meeting. It all begins at 10 o'clock. When our friends at Rogers Television will leave the Rob Snow Show and bring you all the proceedings from the Andrew Hayden Hall. As for the agenda for today's council meeting, we will be watching it closely for you. I mean, the big one is Lansdowne 2.0. There's a letter to the editor in the newspaper today from a former Ottawa City Councillor, Bob Manette. Used to be the City Councillor for Orleans Ward, and he supports Lansdowne 2.0. A few other letter writers, not so charitable. This is, though, the big ticket item of the day. In it, reading through the city report this week, it says total new debt that will be issued for this project would be $239 million. $239 million in debt. The city claims $130 million of that will be paid back from the additional property taxes from the new commercial and residential development slated to occur there, if it's approved. And there would be ticket surcharges estimated to bring in about $800,000 a year. And the annual debt servicing cost would be almost $14 million a year, assuming an interest rate of 4%. In reading through the report, the city's position on Lansdowne 2.0 is that Lansdowne 2.0 is going to be a great success. Just like Lansdowne 1.0 is a great success. 4,000 jobs were created by redeveloping Lansdowne Park. Full-time, part-time jobs, 4,000 jobs, 50 businesses operating there. 20 million visitors have been to the site since Lansdowne was redeveloped. 1,000 events have been held. As for what it will look like, I'm sure you've seen the pictures in the paper. The new Civic Center would have a capacity of about 5,500. The new North Side stands, capacity about 11,000, plus some standing room. And then the 1,200 residential units spaced out over 3 towers, and more retail, about 60,000 square feet. I notice in the report they're not calling it the Civic Center. Not calling it the Civic Center, they're calling it the Event Center, which is, that's very inspiring. Where are you going? I'm going to the Event Center. What's going on there? An event. Total construction costs, $332 million in 2022 dollars. And I think this is going to sail through City Council today, and then it will be back in front of a new and very different-looking City Council next year after the municipal election. So that's a big one today. The Ottawa Citizen editorial today asks, what's the hurry? What else? Barrhaven LRT and the plan to avoid displacing the tenants of Manor Village and Sherrill Gardens. So this involves the revised alignment of that LRT line to run in the median of Woodruff Avenue between Knoxdale and Hunt Club. They looked at doing that early on, but said it would be too complicated, too expensive. But because of the housing affordability crisis in this city and a solid lobbying effort by Councillor McKenney and Acorn, they reconsidered. And now it's back on, would cost between $35 and $50 million. So now, taking LRT out to Barrhaven, building a line out to Barrhaven from Baseline Station would cost $3.52 billion in 2022 dollars, which I'm sure most of you have noticed don't go as far as they used to, those 2022 dollars. $3.5 billion to get light rail from Baseline, the Baseline Transit Station, to Barrhaven Town Center. Like I said, it's going to be an expensive City Council meeting. But maybe the most exciting part, I'm looking forward to this one. I think this will be the most exciting part of today's City Council meeting. When Councillor Luloff and Councillor Kitts, two East End councillors, bring forward their motion for Splash-A-Fax. Splashifax, yeah. Splashifax Water Park Pilot Project. Bring it on. I have seen these things before. They had one a few years ago in Whitewater Region. Basically, it's a floating water slide park on the Ottawa River. And they want to put one at Petrie Island Beach. They're just waiting for approval from Transport Canada. They hope to have that by tomorrow, June 9th. They're supposed to hear from Transport Canada, and if they get that approval, the councillors are asking for a pilot project to bring Splashifax to Petrie Island as soon as this summer, and if all goes well, next summer too. How do you spell fun? Splashifax. Splashifax. Yes, it's City Council Day, and it's gonna be wet and wild. Splashifax.
I'm just reminded of that darn floating rubber duck. You remember that?
Oh, the big yellow rubber duck? Yeah.
It's like that.
Sure, I went to Brockville to see it.
Next level.
I went to Brockville to see it, my friend. It wasn't floating because it was too windy. It was a grounded rubber duck back in those days, a giant rubber duck. Yeah. Coming up in just a few minutes from now, mask mandates with Dr. Doug Manuel, epidemiologist, senior scientist at the Ottawa Hospital, one of our go-to experts on COVID-19. Mask mandates for so-called high-risk settings set to expire on Saturday, but how wise is that? We'll ask the good doctor, which he also happens to be a member of the province's science advisory table. So with these mandates, they still apply to places like public transit, hospitals, doctors' offices, long-term care homes, retirement homes. Supposed to expire at the end of April, they were extended until the 11th of June, which is Saturday, and nobody really knows what the provincial government is going to do. Meantime, some of the local hospitals are saying, we're going to keep our mask mandate in place, thank you very much, no matter what the province says. So we're going to ask the doctor about this. Then, after the 9:30 news, we will score our political fix, and we're going to take a look at this freight train called the Pierre Poilievre Leadership Campaign for the Conservative Party of Canada, signing up more than 300,000 new members, daring the other campaigns to reveal how many members they've signed up. Only Patrick Brown has done so, and it's about half that number, 150,000 or so. So what does that mean for this race? I mean, do you even call it a race anymore? Or are we back into talking about a coronation? King Poilievre. Maybe Poilievre seals the deal on the first ballot, all to be revealed in September. Gary Mason, my goodness, the columnist for the Globe and Mail this morning, takes Poilievre and his supporters out to the woodshed and smacks them around. He hits Poilievre with the label career politician, a wealthy, full-fledged member of the Ottawa elite. His policies range from disturbing to all-out bonkers. I wonder if you could correlate PDS, I'm calling it PDS, Poilievre Derangement Syndrome, PDS, to Poilievre's political momentum. If you could do that, maybe we are headed for a one-ballot wonder. But we're going to get into this. But it has to be, you read a column like that, gosh, it's got to be great to be Mr. Trudeau, right? Just great to be Mr. Trudeau. You have columnists in the newspapers, their obsession is Poilievre. Almost exclusively, Poilievre. All the while, look around, okay? Gas prices at near record highs. Food prices soaring at rates not seen in decades. Home prices starting to falter. Watch that. Interest rates marching higher. The economy slowing down. Inflation is the story. The columnists, fine and dandy, all they want to do is write about Poilievre seemingly giving the prime minister of the day a free pass. Meh, it's a global thing, they say. Okay, as you were, nothing to see here. We had a report this week because there are things to see here. Food Banks Canada, People going hungry because they can't afford to buy food. Skipping meals because they can't afford to buy food. On Mr. Trudeau's watch, that's happening. Yesterday, FP Canada, the organization responsible for regulating certified financial planners in this country, new survey, more than 1/3 of Canadians suffer from anxiety, depression, and deteriorating mental health because they're running out of money because of inflation. On Trudeau's watch. He's the prime minister, the last time I checked. Does he seem seized with this issue at all? There was a time when prime ministers obsessed about inflation. This prime minister does not seem concerned in the least. And his finance minister doesn't seem that interested either. Mr. Poilievre. Let's write about Mr. Poilievre. Mr. Poilievre is powerless to do anything about inflation or offer any kind of relief from inflation. There's not going to be an election that gives Canadians a chance to elect Mr. Poilievre for years because of the Liberal NDP alliance. Yet all they do is write columns about Poilievre and how his ideas are so crazy, giving a free pass to the person who actually runs the country. See, I'm all worked up, and it's not even 9:30 when you will score your political fix. And we'll do the talkback hour between 10 and 11 o'clock on The Rob Snow Show on City News.
If you're lucky, you may be getting a return.
It's so important, and I know I do come on and I talk about this a lot, but you know, every 60 seconds somebody in Canada needs blood, and so it's important to keep reinstilling the message of donating and continuing to get new blood donors to come into our system to support. You know, we have 1 in 2 Canadians who are in need of blood at any given time, but only 1 in 81 people actually donate. So we need to improve those statistics.
Yeah, and you know, helping to improve those statistics, you guys are always coming up with new campaigns, and you've got a new campaign now. Tell me about the campaign.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm happy to. You know, it's kind of about Canadians. We sacrifice everything for people we know and for people we don't. Canadians show up for other Canadians, and we do this out of the goodness of our heart. And right now, especially right now, through the pandemic and, you know, the winter months and the snowstorms, we've had a lot of canceled appointments. We've had, you know, a decline in the number of people who are able to show up for their appointments. And right now, what we really need is for everybody who's eligible to hear the call to show up for patients. So patients in Canada need blood. We want you to show up. We want you to say we're here for you. And with currently only 4% of Canadians who donate blood, we want more people to show up and improve those numbers and really make sure that the hospital patients are comfortable and that they know that blood will always be there for them when and where they need it.
Yeah, and Jen, you mentioned the pandemic, right? And you know, that probably, you know, as you said, had it's one of the biggest reasons why people perhaps have stopped. But you do have health and safety protocols, and we want to encourage people and let them know that those health and safety protocols remain in place. Let's talk a little bit about those.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, our workforce, our volunteers, everybody who works within the blood donor clinic is fully vaccinated. And we have many wellness procedures throughout, step by step. If you donated through the pandemic, you'll notice the distancing, you'll notice the wellness stations, the health checks at the front end, some more eligibility criteria, as you can imagine. But all of it is just to make sure that the experience itself is safe and reliable. And now we need people to come in and go through that process with us so that the end outcome, again, is that lovely unit of blood going to a hospital somewhere to help a patient.
101.1 FM and 1310 10 a.m.
Let's talk about mask mandates. Hey, stop me if you've heard that one before. Mask mandates, the last remaining mask mandates, these are for high-risk settings, are set to expire on Saturday, but there's a great debate raging about whether they should or not. We're joined once more by family physician and epidemiologist, senior scientist at the Ottawa Hospital, Dr. Doug Manuel. Welcome back.
Pleasure to be back.
Yeah, great to hear from you today. What do you think should happen with the remaining mask mandates for things like public transit, healthcare settings, long-term care homes, retirement homes? What should happen there?
Well, you've covered a bit of a gamut there. I'll be a little bit surprised if we see places like hospitals and especially hospitals, healthcare settings decide themselves to drop the masks at this point. To be honest, it's been a bit of a creeper. Like I kind of forgot that this was going to potentially expire, and I haven't really had a lot of discussions or heard discussions about it in my circle. So when I saw the news yesterday, it's like, oh yeah, we haven't really been having discussions about dropping. It's always been, I've had discussions, but it's been, we're not ready yet to have that discussion where we still need to see the numbers come down. And then we'll do our calculations. I haven't done a lot of the calculations about the risks if we drop the mask rates now in different settings. So we haven't even I've been involved in some of those discussions, but we haven't even kind of got the calculator out. So it was a bit of a surprise. I think Rob, in each of these different settings, the concern is like you said, the high risk people. So we're transitioning from trying to protect us all and slow transmission down to protecting the high risk people. And we have the wastewater level is 5 times higher than it was before Christmas, and the positivity rate is around 10%. And we, a year ago, we were at a positivity rate of 1% was starting to be a lot of transmission. So we're still seeing a fair amount of transmission in the community, and we've kind of gotten used to it, I think, in some ways. But yeah. I'll tell you, the people who are high risk have not gotten used to it. And I talk to a lot of people that I get calls often about, should I go to this event? And it's not even, say, someone who is high risk of developing complications, older people. It could be someone caring for them. If I go to this event and I come home, am I going to infect my grandmother? So we have quite a few people in our community that are still quite concerned, and I think legitimately concerned. I don't think it's just sort of they're feeling unwarrantably scared, but people, if they do get COVID and they're immunocompromised, can run into trouble. So I think collectively, how much do we want to protect people, and I think in healthcare settings and things like this, where there's just full of people that we need to protect, you're going to see masks being used for a while still.
Okay. So what would you like to know from, say, a data point of view? What would you like to look at here?
Well, the risk of an outbreak or risk of transmission. Okay. And then be able to tell people, and then we kind of balancing risks and harms. And so it's not, when I'm in healthcare, like we have people in long-term care homes that have been wearing masks for several years, and I think they're used to it and happy and willing to do that. But it's not ideal, so there is some cost to that. And so you want to not do that if you don't need to. But what's happening in most of these settings, they're keeping the masks as the last thing. So you might have now people in gyms and doing activities together in a gym in a long-term care home, like some fitness, but they'll be wearing their mask when they do that. And so it's sort of keeping the mask as the last thing, last form of protection. It can reduce the risk of protection, can reduce the risk, at least by half, but probably more like 80%. So that's, it's our way to protecting our vulnerable folks.
Okay. Just looking at some of the data this morning on the Ottawa Public Health COVID-19 dashboard, there are a series of charts there covering everything from institutional outbreaks to hospitalizations to daily confirmed cases, wastewater counts. These charts only go back to around the 10th of May, so about a month's worth. But without exception, all the trend lines seem to be going in the right direction. So what worries you?
Well, no, it's doing great. No, I think the summer is still looking good, and I think masks are going to come off, but it's just a question of what level. And to be honest, we've been thinking it would be lower than this. I think most people I talked to would be lower than this, just like I said, because it's still the numbers coming down, but the positivity rate in the wastewater in particular is still pretty high. We still have absenteeism for healthcare workers. Healthcare workers are still calling up with COVID positive, and so we still are keeping these protections, testing and masks, especially for our healthcare setting. How much lower? Like I said, I haven't really done the calculations. I think it's good to have that discussion now, and I'm really kind of, hearing the news yesterday made me think we need to get the calculators and start doing the numbers and giving some guidance for that. It's going to be soon, I think, or definitely in the summer. At this rate, I think we're doing really well.
Yeah. There's just a few days left before this is set to expire. It's supposed to expire on Saturday. Dr. Moore, at least his people, have told the news media it's under review. What do you think they're looking at? What do you think they're looking at?
Well, they're numbers. I think that I just talked like calculating the risk of infection. It's not. I don't think we're really worried about like new waves at this point. It's going to continue going down. It's just protecting the vulnerable folks, and it could be I think it could be one thing that say you don't have, healthcare institutes don't have to have masks. Now, we're not mandating it, but then it will be up to the healthcare institute to decide on their level of risk. Or it could be things like, general transportation, maybe taking the mask off, but keep it on for paratransportation, for our most vulnerable folks. One area that I'm still discouraged at is that it's difficult for a lot of people to gauge their level of risk, especially for things like ventilation. So you're going into a setting and you don't know whether to wear a mask or not. You don't know whether that setting is safe, like if you're a vulnerable person, and that we really haven't we've done a fantastic job in some places like schools to improve ventilation, and it's made a difference, but we haven't had that discussion we've had the discussion, but we haven't seen action in a lot of businesses or long-term care homes or other settings about reducing the risk in the environment or informing people about what that air circulation is and that ventilation is.
Yeah. I think about someone who's undergoing, say, a cancer treatment. And I'm sure there are people who have had interactions with people who are undergoing cancer treatment, and they have to be very cautious about being out in public, not shaking people's hands, these sorts of things, because if they catch anything, it could be very troublesome. It could be deadly, and I'm sure COVID is the same way. So that's what I'm thinking about. Is we're talking about some pretty vulnerable populations here in a healthcare setting, where people are going to get treatments in a long-term care home where people may have multiple chronic health issues. Same with a retirement home. Perhaps, as you say, OC transpo, maybe more paratranspo, right? We are talking about people who could be very compromised from a health standpoint. I guess that's my concern. So,
yeah, and I think you have. I just had a call on the weekend for someone who was living with someone who was very ill, and they were asking me should they go to a graduation ceremony because they were concerned about going to graduations in this big event. No one was going to. They announced that they weren't going to require a mask or testing, and they were concerned that they would go there, get sick, bring it back home to the person they're caring for. So there's more immunocompromised people than we realize, but there's also a lot of caregivers for those people as well.
Okay. But outside of the mask issue, generally speaking, you think we're in a pretty good place right now with COVID-19 in the community? Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. The summer is going to be great. We'll have a conversation in the fall. about what the winter will look like. But we've gone through a lot. We've gone through more than expected with in Ottawa, especially with January and February were really difficult, both socially with the convoys and also the high levels of infections. And we've earned community immunity now the hard way, and we have lower levels and it's declining because we have such a high number of people that have been infected over the past few months, and that helps us, with the immunizations. It helps us live more freely too in the summer and in fall.
Okay. All around, not bad news. Thank you, Dr. Doug Manuel. Always great to hear from you.
Good to hear from you.
One, two, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3.
Today is a very exciting day. We are officially opening the Interzip Rogers for the summer season of this year. Last year we were expecting to have maybe 20,000 people, and we actually had over 30,000 riders for the first year. So we're really excited to reopen this year.
That was epic and scary!
You have a really different perspective view-wise of the area we're in. So you have a clear view of the Parliament. Obviously you're crossing the river, and of course you're moving from a province to another, which is unique of this zip line. It doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. Rogers has been partners even before Interzip opened, actually. They were all in the first meeting we had with Rogers, and that for us was really a nice commitment. We're really fortunate to have Rogers with us, and on top of having Rogers, it's basically the name of the zipline, which is the Interzip Rogers, that is now pretty much renowned across the country.
Rogers Interzip is a great activity for people who live in or visit the National Capital Region. Get out and have an opportunity to zip across the Ottawa River between Ottawa and Outaouais.
And the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Wednesday, June 8th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, 17 degrees, and here's what's making news this hour. Mask mandates at high-risk settings are scheduled to end on Saturday across Ontario. Epidemiologist Dr. Doug Manuel tells City News he would be surprised if healthcare settings decide to drop the mandate. Dr. Manuel says some indicators of COVID are still relatively high, and for the sake of the most vulnerable, they should remain in place in places like hospitals and long-term care. City councillors getting set for a double meeting of sorts today. The council session postponed 2 weeks ago due to the Victoria Day long weekend storm, so items were moved to this session. Among the high-profile discussions, Lansdowne redevelopment proposal, including a new rink, new Northside stands, and 3 residential towers. Leaders from the Western Hemisphere gathering in LA today, including Prime Minister Trudeau for the latest edition of the Summit of the Americas. Trudeau begins today with Barbados counterpart Mia Mottley. They're talking environmental priorities. He then moves on to a roundtable meeting with Latin American and Caribbean leaders. They will discuss climate change, defend democratic values, and promote gender equality. City News Time, 9:34. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Firm.
Fair.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM.
and 1310 AM.
It's time to score your political fix. Jeff Turner's back, Vice President, Blue Sky. Morning, Jeff.
Good morning.
Jeff. And Tim Powers, Chair, Summa Strategies. Good morning, Tim. Welcome back.
Good to be with you, Icon. Always a pleasure.
Yes. Named after a condo building at the corner of Carling and Preston.
Isn't that the truth?
Yes. Okay. You know that old Mr. Burns line from The Simpsons? Mr. Burns, your campaign seems to have all the momentum of a runaway freight train. Why are you so popular? That's what this segment is going to sound like, only it's about Poilievre, okay? If Pierre Poilievre, Tim Powers, has signed up 312,000 new members of the Conservative Party, is this race over?
Not necessarily, but it's a clear strategy, and credit for the Poilievre campaign for employing it, of suggesting to others that it is. You've seen them out aggressively showcasing the number of voters they say they've signed up and showcasing it across the regions. They are trying to convince others, both voters and candidates, that it is done. Why are they trying to do that? Because there's still 3 months to go in this thing, and the danger when you're the front runner with at least 8 weeks probably or longer, Rob, before people actually vote, those members who have signed up, and first of all they have to be validated, is that anything could happen over that 8-week period. I'd also add that, and again, all this is unverifiable at the moment, but both the Charest camp and the Brown camp say they have paths to victory. How is that possible, might your listeners say, when they hear Pierre has 312,000? Well, it's not simply who has the most votes who wins. It's this horrible phrase called voter efficiency, meaning if you have, say, of those 312,000, 30,000 of those voters are in 4 ridings. Well, that doesn't get you 30,000 points, may only get you 400 points. Why 400? Because each riding is only worth 100. So is it over? No. Can others still win? Yes, but certainly there's a game afoot, as there always are in leadership races, to suggest that don't even bother. We can win this, and they may very well win it, but it's not over yet.
Okay. What do you think, Jeff Turner? Do we move from talking about this being a race to this is a Poilievre coronation? Now we're going to talk about King Pierre from now on. King Pierre, long may he reign.
No, I don't think we should talk that way. I agree entirely with Tim's analysis there. It absolutely is a gutsy strategy by the Poilievre campaign. Seems to be working, but in terms of just trying to basically say, this is ours, get out of the race. And I think the reason I say it's gutsy is because during the course of this campaign, Mr. Poilievre has done absolutely nothing, in fact has done the opposite, to encourage second ballot support. So they better win this thing on the first ballot because they don't have anybody who's going to come to them after that. And I think that's the biggest problem they have, and that's why they're doing, as Tim says, their best to try to scare everybody else out of the race so that it doesn't have to come to that actual decision point with a competitive race. I also agree with Tim that there's a lot of time left for things to change. It is an incredibly impressive numbers. Like, kudos to that. They definitely got energy and excitement and people at these rallies and people to sign up. I would point out, as Tim said, there is a process to voting, and many of these folks that they've cultivated have come from traditionally non-voting pools. You have, obviously, we all know well that Mr. Poilievre has been cultivating what I'll just shorthand as the conspiracy set. So how likely are these folks to go through the 4-step voting process? How likely are these folks to photocopy their license and send it to Ottawa? Because they have to do that to get their ballot. There are logistical issues like that. Tim points out the riding point system is very important there. And at the end of the day, there is still a competitive vote as some of the other leadership campaigns consolidate their votes and have strong second support on the ballot. So I think there is a race left to be had.
So if you're someone like Poilievre, what do you do, Jeff, to try and close the deal?
Well, boy, you stay on to, like any leadership campaign, you stay on top of those members that you've signed up and identified. Right. You do your very best to keep them engaged.
Persuade and mobilize.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One of the interesting facts I learned about the balloting process for the Conservatives will be that the ballots will be sent out in groups and in order of how long you've been a member. So long-term members will get their ballots first. The later you signed up in this, so if you signed up last week, you'll be one of the last people to get your ballots. So I think that also provides an interesting, dynamic where, a lot of those new signups will be some of the last people and have the shortest window to turn around their validation and their ballot versus the older or more, longer term party members. So that's an interesting dynamic too. Are you able to get them to vote in that short period of time?
And gosh, one of the challenges must be, Tim Powers, is just to keep people interested. Summer vacation is coming up, and there's so much in the news cycle right now, right?
Well, and look, I think the party is not going to have this all validated and done till some point in July. Voting is probably not going to start until late July. So there's a long time between the buzz of 312,000 and July and early August. And don't forget the results not until September 10th. The mechanics of it are fascinating, not to bore the listeners, but one interesting point is, what is the proof of your proof of identity going to be? Last time, people had to photocopy licenses, so we all, or other forms of government ID. So how many people have a photocopier at home? How many people, if they're off work, are going to go into work and do a photocopy? I mean, there's stories last time of the whole leadership race with McKay and O'Toole of people driving around, organizers with portable photocopiers running off photocopies of licenses and the like, so that they could submit ballots. The more difficult it becomes to vote, particularly in the summer, the harder it's going to be to get people to vote. So again, you have smart activists in all these campaigns. They're working on all of that, but they will meet up with human inertia of summer and disengagement that will mean that you will not get anywhere near 100% turnout, which never happens anyway. So what's the drop-off? How does that look? And how does that affect, again, the so-called voter efficiency in different ridings?
And Tim, if you're the individual campaigns, what do you want to know from the organizers of the leadership campaign?
Well, right now? What the proof of identification?
Proof of identification.
And what you're going to expect.
But you want a list, right? You want a list.
And they will have some sense of that now anyway. I believe they may already know that, but they're going to want to know, because they're going to want to be able to message their voters to say, all right, here's what you need to put in there. If you don't have X, Y, or Z, tell us and we will help you. If you need something photocopied, tell us and we will help you. Because you don't want to leave that to the last moment. I mean, collecting the ballots can be a colossal pain in the backside.
All right. Look, we're going to stop a little. Sorry, Jeff, if you want to add something there very quickly.
I was just going to say, in terms of the list as well, part of why all of the campaigns want the formal list from the party is that formal list comes with contact information. And so it allows, the Jean Charest campaign or the Patrick Brown campaign to call those members signed up by the Poilievre campaign and make their pitch. And so the sooner they get that list, the more that they can get it and actually try to flip voters to their side by doing direct engagement.
Okay. The Prime Minister and inflation. When we come back, it's your political fix. Rob Snow Show, City News.
Les abeilles butinent le fer. Réveille le rêve disparu pareil qu'hier. Oui, pas le 9 à 5, puis le overtime qui paye même pas la routine. Anyways. Mon break va bientôt finir. 15 minutes, ça part dans le temps de dire riche, seulement. Mais le boulot, faut quand même se rendre là. C'est pour ça qu'on a le 9 à 5, puis le overtime qui paye même pas la routine. Anyways. Comment dire ça, bâtir sous nous, on a besoin d'aide. Comment dire les sous nous, on a besoin d'aide. maman et c'est la partie. Elle cherche à avancer son temps. Mais tabarnak, ça coûte cher en dedans. C'est pour ça qu'on a le 9 à 5, puis le overtime, qui paye même pas la routine. Anyways, comment se bâtir son nom? On a besoin d'aide. Comment les édifices son nom? On a besoin d'aide. Oh, on a besoin d'aide. Oh.
Rogers TV and City News.
1011 FM
and 1310 AM.
Back with your political fix. Jeff Turner, Vice President, Blue Sky Strategy Group. Tim Powers, Chair at Summa Strategies. There was a time in Canadian history when governments were preoccupied with inflation. You can imagine the pitch when we were all just little babes in arms. Hi, I'm Bob Stanfield. I will bring in wage and price controls. Oh, I'm Pierre Trudeau. Wage and price controls are a silly idea. Trudeau wins the election, brings in wage and price controls. The Anti-Inflation Act of 1975, widely considered a miserable failure, but at least it was top of mind for the government as prices rose almost 11% between 81 and 82. By the end of the Mulroney era, through much pain, inflation finally wrestled down to 1.8%. Mulroney supported Mr. Crow as the chair, the governor of the Bank of Canada at the time, who was an anti-inflationist. His term not renewed by Mr. Chrétien. Pushed out, some would say, by Mr. Chrétien. Whether that was the right or the wrong idea, at least Mr. Chrétien was thinking about it. The current government does not seem at all seized with the most important issue in the country, the real pain that Canadians are living through with the rising cost of living. Jeff Turner, what happened to the middle class and those working hard to join it? Jeff Turner. Okay? Why is Mr. Trudeau forgetting about us?
It's all Jeff's fault,
What
Rob,
could possibly
clearly
be more important than this? And where is the finance minister? My gosh, the adult in the room, usually pretty much on the ball. She's the only one I would trust with the ball in that cabinet. Where is Chrystia Freeland, the finance minister? This is the all-consuming question right now for Canadians. What is the government going to do about inflation? Jeff?
Yeah, Rob, first of all, I agree. Look, we have to definitely recognize that, in particular, gas prices and food prices and housing prices are having an enormous impact on folks who did not have very much margin in their lives to begin with. And so it is a real impact, especially those in rural and remote areas who do a lot of driving to get to their jobs, to get their kids to school, to get their kids to daycare, et cetera. So it's a very real issue. And I definitely agree with you that it's one of those ones that the government needs to be paying attention to at the very front of its agenda. And that has been more of the front of others' agenda than this government. So I'll agree with that. I think the challenge, of course, is that this is not a Canadian-caused situation, much as some will obviously keep it domestic in their criticism. Our inflation rate in the mid-sixes right now is less than 40% of that of Europe and the United States, which are riding up in the 9 and 10 and 11% range. So we are not as effective as other places.
That's all about the calculations. That's all what's in the basket. That's all what's in the consumer basket. Used cars are part of the consumer basket in the United States. They're not in Canada. I mean, the fact I get this argument from the Liberals, okay? The spin that it's global. But that doesn't mean that solutions necessarily have to be global. There are domestic solutions. Mr. Biden says this is his top concern, so he's working on things like student loan relief, for example. Prime Minister Johnson, if he survives, nevertheless, his finance minister has already passed a multi-billion pound sterling relief bill, sending checks directly to people in the UK. You have the Lego bucks, okay? You might say that, well, that's election election politics. Still, it's $500 they didn't have before. Ford and Kenny cutting gas taxes. Even the New Democrats out in BC. Here's $110. Go buy yourself a tank of gas. Relief is domestic. Nothing from this government, Jeff. Nothing.
I hear you, Rob. You're right to point out what the solutions are. Raise the interest rates. That's happening, and that's going to slow down the economy pretty quickly. I think we're all actually looking at potentially a recession just to compound all of these problems coming down the line as a result of those interest rate hikes. You can cut the gas tax, but 5.5 cents in Ontario. Gas went up 20 cents this weekend, so that's not going to solve the problem. Direct checks, that's definitely a way of getting money into people's pockets and certainly comes with political dimensions. And then wage and price controls, as you said, but that's something that just has been off of public policy radar since the 70s and 80s. So, I hear you. The need for relief is there. And if the government's looking at something, I guess that direct payment is the way to go, because I don't think cutting gas taxes is really the way to approach it, because I don't think it actually makes that big of a difference in the long term. This is room that's filled right up by the oil price once it's done.
Okay. Tim Powers?
Well,
to
Rob,
me, they're just MIA. To me, this government is MIA on the biggest worry Canadians have right now, and that's money.
Well, and also MIA on what's happening in Pearson Airport. And why do the two link? Because we're about to hit summer travel, and that's also more expensive. So let's just say it's costing you more to go somewhere, and just about everybody in Canada, if they want to leave the region, has to go through Pearson Airport, and they're going to stand in line for 6 or 7 hours because the government has regulations there that maybe have gone past their best before date, and they can address those things. But it looks like, as it relates to inflation, the federal government is just trying to have the provinces address it. From Newfoundland to BC, everybody's trying to do something. I agree with Jeff. There aren't perfect solutions, but there are, some measures. The original call, I think it was from the Conservatives, was some temporary relief on GST. That affects just about everything you buy. Again, It's not big stuff, but a dollar here, a dollar there does make a bit of a difference, and it's symbolically important. It shows you give a damn. The really good temporary relief on some form of taxation that's applied to gas, whether it's on carbon pricing and or on the excise tax. There's ways to do this that can help. I think, to your point, it really is about not looking tone deaf to and feeling like you don't matter, and that's what people do want in circumstances.
In the UK, you have a Tory government in the UK. Their relief package, their aid package, is funded by a windfall tax. Which you would think Mr. Singh would be open up to.
Well,
something like that,
Mr. Singh yesterday was talking about, let's just bring in a tax immediately and tax all the wealthy, and we'll redistribute $1,000 to everybody. That stuff's kind of kooky, and that would drive the Liberal Party. What blue Liberals are left would lose their minds if Mr. Trudeau went in that particular direction. But there are more deliberate tools right now that you can at least play with in the short term to address this.
But aren't they, by not coming up with some kind of solution, however modest and however late, are they not just ceding political ground to Poilievre, who's been such a hawk on inflation and will continue to pound away on that, Jeff?
I think it's less about conceding political ground and more about the types of folks who do support the Liberal Party, working people, again, as I said, people who don't always have a large margin in their household budget. So I think it's less about worrying about conservative-leaning voters and more about actually the actual base of the Liberal Party of Canada, which is working people who live in cities and small urban centres and some rural areas, who work hourly jobs, who work hard, who do manufacturing, who do all kinds of things. I think that's the risk. It's not about losing a partisan fight. It's about, to your point exactly, Rob and Tim, about being tone deaf to those who are your voters and your supporters. Okay. So there is that, and the not so dirty secret here, and it's benefiting all governments, provincial and federal, is that this cycle also increases tax revenues. So they are pulling in more sales tax on those higher prices and higher gas prices. They're pulling in more fuel tax on those just by proportion because of the price increase. So they have the money coming in, and as we know, all governments across Canada are facing deficits for the most part. I think save Alberta, with the sort of direct impact of oil prices in that budget. So governments, to your point, have the capacity, and so I do hope the federal government's looking at how they can use that capacity, not just to fund their agenda and their deficit, but also to provide some direct relief or to make some extraordinary measures. And I agree with you, Rob. It's something that they are a little bit missing in action and need to step up some more and take by the horns.
Good stuff.
For their own people, not for Poilievre.
Okay. I want to, just in the few minutes we have left, let's just kind of tie a bow on the Ontario election. First of all, in advance of the election, we would talk about it on a weekly basis here every few weeks. And one of the races that we were interested in watching was Ottawa Centre. Were you surprised how well the NDP did there in Ottawa Centre? It was not close. I was.
Well, let me speak as a resident.
Go ahead. Yeah.
In the end, no. I mean, I think Katie Gibbs, I've said this before, was a good candidate, but I think credit to Hardin. I think he benefited from a strong constituency appearance and a effort at building a record here. I think also Katie Gibbs was probably hurt by a lackluster provincial campaign and a leader that really didn't catch on. But I think she would have been tough in here anyway, because Hardin is building that rapport as a good constituency MP, and this riding does seem to like, whether they're Liberal or New Democrats, good constituency MPs.
Well, I'll tell you what, if that party's looking for a new leader now, I would look to Ottawa Centre if I were the Ontario New Democrats. They've got something there. Jeff Turner, what'd you think of that race, just in particular?
Yeah, very good point. I'm an activist in Ottawa Centre as well, and as you know, that's my kind of political home too. I'm very proud of Katie, the campaign that she ran, and I appreciate Tim saying that on not just this occasion but others, that she was an excellent candidate. I do agree. Joel Hardin has organized at the grassroots. He's really cultivated an activist network in Ottawa Centre that have become an NDP activist network. And I think that's definitely paid off in spades. I think it was a little bit unclassy of him to take a shot at the leader who was going to resign 20 minutes later. That's pretty unclassy. So I don't know how that went over with NDP members across the land, but definitely a surprising result. I'll just point out though that Yasser Naxi won substantially in 2019, just 6 months ago. So it goes to show that vote is fluid, and it goes to show that, as Tim said, the provincial campaign had a direct impact. I was knocking on doors on election day in Ottawa Centre, and I definitely heard Liberal voters tell me that they were not very excited about what their option was provincially and about going to the voting station, and that's simply it. They just stayed home.
Okay. All right. Let's wrap it up there for this week. Great to speak with both of you. Thanks so much for the time this morning.
Thank you.
Yep, bye-bye.
Thank you both.
That's your political fix on this Wednesday morning with Jeff Turner. He's Vice President of Blue Sky Strategy Group. And Tim Powers. He's the chair of Summa Strategy. So the Talkback Hour is coming up right after the 10 o'clock news, your hour, your phone calls, your opinions. The mask mandate, kind of last standing mask mandate, one of the few remaining pandemic health-related restrictions. This is for high-risk settings, so hospitals, long-term care homes, retirement homes, public transit. That mask mandate is supposed to end on Saturday. What should the government do?
This program is brought to you by Ignite